Before Amelia Earhart took off from Lae, New Guinea, she made one small choice. She left a piece of equipment behind. It was called a trailing wire antenna. It was long, like a fishing line made of metal. It was awkward to use. It took real time to reel it out and real time to reel it back in. But it could double the range of her radio. It could help her voice travel further over open water. She had used it before on earlier legs of her long trip around the world. On this leg, over open ocean toward an island only 2 miles wide, she chose not to bring it. The date was July 2nd, 1937. The plane was a Lockheed Electra, silver and loud on the runway. Amelia was one of the most famous pilot women on Earth. However, the machine meant to call for help inside her plane, if help was ever needed, was already weaker than it used to be. By the summer of 1937, Amelia Earhart was not just a pilot. She was a business. Newspapers printed her name every single week. Sponsors had paid good money for fuel, for spare parts, and for the plane itself. Her husband, George Putnam, had spent years turning her flight into headlines and turning those headlines into money. Editors were waiting. Radio stations were waiting. She had already flown 2/3 of the way around the world, through South America, across Africa, over India, past Southeast Asia. Only the hardest part was left. One leg hop across open Pacific water, aiming for a tiny strip of sand called Howland Island. The trailing wire antenna was not lost by accident. It was removed on purpose back on the ground before this leg even began. It kept snagging on earlier stops. It kept breaking in small ways that cost time to fix. And one of her 2 radio operators, a skilled man named Joseph Gurr, had already left the trip weeks earlier in California. Without him on board, using the antenna the right way was harder for the crew that remained. So leaving it behind felt like solving a real problem. It did not feel like creating a new one. She still had a working radio. She still had a flight plan, checked and rechecked by experienced navigators. There was also a clock ticking behind the whole trip. Amelia had told reporters she wanted to finish before her 40th birthday, and that birthday was only weeks away. Newspapers back home had already printed the date as if it were a promise. Turning around now, after crossing 2/3 of the globe, after all the money spent and all the front page promises made, was not something anyone around her was seriously discussing. Her ground crew in Lae worked fast that morning, checking fuel, checking oil, checking the weather charts one last time, all under the same quiet pressure to keep moving forward. The flight had built its own momentum, the way a heavy ball rolls faster once it starts moving downhill. Stopping had quietly started to feel like the actual risk, more dangerous than continuing. Nobody standing in that hangar in Lae believed they were being careless. They believed they were being efficient, trimming weight, saving time, trusting the plan they had built together over many months. They were almost out of time and almost out of ocean to cross. And one heavy coil of wire felt like a small, sensible thing to leave on the ground. At 10:22 in the morning on July 2nd, Amelia lifted off from Lae with navigator Fred Noonan seated beside her. Ahead of them lay 2,200 miles of open water and one impossibly small target. Waiting near that target was a Coast Guard cutter Itasca, anchored close to Howland Island. Its small crew of radio operators listening closely for her voice through the static. The first hour of the long flight went smoothly and fine. Then, slowly, the messages coming in started to feel strange. Amelia reported cloudy, difficult weather ahead of the plane. Later, she reported she was running low on fuel. Her transmissions came in strong sometimes and painfully weak other times. And the Itasca crew could never quite lock a clear, steady signal to guide her safely in. At 7:42 in the morning, local time, she said something that would outlive her. "We must be on you, but cannot see you. Gas is running low." The Itasca operators tried to answer back immediately. They kept sending signal after signal, but there is no solid proof that Amelia ever received a single one of their replies. Her radio, without that missing antenna, could receive weaker signals than it could send out, a small mismatch in range that suddenly mattered enormously now. 20 hours into a flight with no land anywhere in sight. At 8:43 in the morning, her final confirmed message came through the static. She said she was flying a search pattern, north and south, along one narrow line. Then, after the final message, the radio went completely quiet and it never spoke again. The full story didn't end at Howland Island. It reached back years into every choice, every sponsor, every headline that came long before the final flight. Susan Butler traces that whole arc in her biography, East to the Dawn, built from 10 years of research into Amelia Earhart's own private letters and journals. The free audiobook is linked in the description below. There is a name for what happened inside that hangar at Lae. It's called escalation of commitment. Think of it like this. The more money, time, and pride a person pours into a plan, the harder it becomes to walk away from it later, even after the plan starts showing cracks. The more a person or a team has already put into a plan, the harder it becomes to change course, even when new facts clearly say they should. In 1976, a researcher named Barry Stowe studied this exact pattern in a famous paper called Knee-Deep in the Big Muddy. He found that people don't just quietly ignore bad warning signs along the way. They often respond to those bad signs by investing even more, not less, especially when they chose the path themselves and said so loudly, in public, for everyone to hear. Amelia's choice fits this pattern closely, almost perfectly. She had not just flown 2/3 of the way around the world already, she had told the entire world she would finish the job. Every sponsor, every newspaper headline, every dollar already spent had slowly turned one woman's personal flight into a public promise she could not easily break. Removing a single antenna was, on its own, a small technical fix, but underneath that one small choice sat a much bigger, much quieter decision. The decision to keep going no matter what her equipment could no longer do for her. The closer she flew toward Howland, the more unthinkable turning back had become in her mind. That is not weakness, and it never was. It is simply how human commitment actually works under pressure. And it is exactly what Stowe's research would predict, decades before anyone gave this pattern even a name. Picture that hangar in Lae one more time. A long coil of wire sits on the ground beside the plane, coiled up and still. It is light. It is small. It would have taken only a few extra minutes to load onto the aircraft. Amelia Earhart looks at that coil of wire and looks at her tight schedule and looks at everything already spent to carry her this far around the world. She leaves it behind on the ground. That coil of wire was never really about weight or about time or even about radio range in the end. It was about how far she had already traveled, mile after mile, headline after headline, and how impossible it had quietly become to imagine turning around now. The same public mass that had made her a legend across the world was the very same mass that made stopping feel like the real failure, when stopping this one time might have been the only choice that could have saved her. Instead, somewhere over the wide Pacific, the right words are still going out on the right frequency, dying a few hundred miles short of anyone.